Hey friends, I think you'll enjoy this entrepreneurial inspiration. This video is a composite of all the clips from the episodes I've done so far that have really great inspirational tidbits for those who want to be in business for themselves or even move up the corporate ladder. You'll see a wide variety of podcast locations, so be patient because this is also a snapshot of my journey as a podcaster and experimenting with different setups. So I think you'll enjoy it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.
9 times out of 10, I think people know when they're young of what they're true passionate. And you just got to go back and tap into that person and be like, what did I absolutely love doing when I was a kid? Like, what made me really, really happy?
Yeah, and how does that translate into a job now? Because, 30, 40 years ago, the jobs that we have now didn't exist. So it's almost like tapping into that childhood excitement, but then finding the patterns of what about that made you excited, and then how does that translate to a job today?
And not only that, is you have to know the foundation of what makes you happy because that may look different. It may not be the same job per se. So, for example, what makes me happy is helping people and solving problems. What makes me happy is standing up for things that most people are afraid to say and stand up for. And so, right now, that's in human resources and will probably majority of my life look like something in human resources. But that doesn't mean I can't take that and move that to a different field or a different type of look and do that exact same thing. So you have to find what the foundation is because that foundation can be different parts of different positions, different fields. But as long as you're doing that foundation, then you'll still find joy.
That's so good because we do get attached to a certain title or maybe like a certain certain field, and then we don't realize that you can find happiness or fulfillment in other fields, but just having that knowledge of the core of what makes it enjoyable for you. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's so true because I'm experiencing that now with the podcast, and parts of what I've done for so long and who I've been and who I've evolved to be can kind of play out in a different way.
So I tell people until you can tell me what your dream job looks like and exactly what you want to do, you're just going to jump from job to job to job. I know people who have great resumes, great careers and titles, and make an awesome salary, and they're miserable. And the reason they're miserable is because they kind of grew into it. They're really good at the job and they just grew into it. So naturally, they progressed in the company. But if you ask them if they enjoy what they do, no, it just kind of worked out for them. So it's really important not to just get on that treadmill and just keep running because you're running nowhere. When you really should stop and say, is this my passion? Am I fulfilling what I believe I'm put on this earth to do? Because if I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm just going to put in 15 plus years and I'm going to look back and be like, I didn't enjoy any of it because
Yeah.
I just wasn't my passion.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because money doesn't equal passion, and advancement doesn't equal passion until you take it back, strip it all back, and figure out what you actually want. It's impossible for you to move forward with any sort of sustainability. So let's say a person figures out what really makes them excited about life, and then they realize that where they're at doesn't align with that, and they're looking for a new job. They're going to some interviews. What what could help a person in those interview situations figure out if that job is the right fit for them?
Well, the first thing I tell people to do is first you got to find that dream job. So go look and find a job posting that you believe is your dream job. And then look at what they're asking for on the resume for experience wise or what they say the job duties will be, because that's what they're going to ask you in an interview. And if you can't answer or say you've done those things, then you won't be successful in the job interview. So I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation that you could just say, oh, that's the job I want, so I'm just going to walk in there and get it. No, you do actually have to have some experience. So what I encourage people to do is when you're looking at those job duties and the experience, see how you can try to get that in your current position or with your current company. Like, have those conversations with your manager. Like, I would like to do X, Y, Z that's on this job description, or I would like to gain more experience in X, Y, and Z that's on this job for experience wise, so that you can start building your resume, because that is going to be important. But then don't stop there, because that's also putting all of your hope and dreams into the one person. Go out and volunteer. Get that experience from volunteering with nonprofit organizations so that you can still take control of building your experience. And then that will help you be successful in the job interview to where you can get to that next step. But I also tell people each job that you have is preparing you for the next position. And that's why I say, like, every day is an interview, not the day the job opens, because what you're doing right now, how you're working right now, is preparing you either for the next level or is preparing you to stay exactly where you are.
That's good. That's tweetable.
I finally found a job, and I had this saying with my buddy, and tried to minimize my cussing here, but I got to say it like this. So I told him that, if a business owner knew the drive and the focus and the desire for success that I personally have, they would hire me. I will shovel shit barefooted up to my knees if you just give me a paycheck. Like, I was legit, there's no way. I even told a guy, and this is how I got my first real job out here. I told a guy at Subway that I would work for him for free. I was like, man, I can run this place. I used to run one of these. I'll work for free for you today. And if you like what you see, then hire me. And if you don't like what you see, well, I'll get to stepping. But I think you're going to find I'm a hard worker, And he did. He didn't make me work for free, but he did give me a job and gave me an opportunity. But I gave the same speech to this guy. Naturally, I was looking for something better than Subway. A minimum wage is just not a way to, get anywhere. So I wanted something better. I wanted to trade. I wanted to get into the industry that I'm in now. And I did the same thing. I said, hey, I'll work for free. If you don't like what you got, I'm worth $15 an hour, okay? And so that's how it started. I swept warehouse floors and built, filtration systems, and that's where it started. And I just stayed committed. I was scared to death going through prison. Not saying that I didn't deserve to go there, but it still didn't change the fear, And then I get through it, and now I'm scared to death that I'm going to fail. I feel like I've prepared myself, and the best I could. I only had what I had. I had the resources available to me at that time in prison, and this is all I had, And I gave it everything that I had to grow to the best of my ability. And so here I am on the street, and somebody finally gives me a chance, So, man, I'm sweeping that floor extra good. I'm building this stuff extra well, I am trying to be proactive with the new thoughts, I remember when I finally won my first boss over. He says, hey, this is when I also learned Google's a great thing. He says, hey, Jay, I need you to get me a quote together and fix these ballast. Now, up until this point, anything that he asked me, and that still is true today, anytime that anybody asks me something, I can do it. I might not even know what you're talking about. By the minute I turn around, I'm going to Google it, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to learn it, because it can be learned.
Right.
If there is, anyway. So I remember he says, I need you to take a quote and build this ballast and, whatnot. And I'm like, okay. He's like, can you handle that? I'm like, yes, sir. I was yes, man. There was not one thing that this guy was ever going to ask me that I said, I don't know how I'm doing. I am going to be your asset, And so I'm like, yes, sir, I can do that. And I turn around, I'm going, what the heck is a ballast? I'm thinking, does he have a sailboat at his house, Like he wants me to work on a sailboat? Whatever. He just pay me a paycheck. Like I said, man, just shovel it over the shoulder, And so So I Google around on ballasts. I'm like, oh, the things in the neon lights. Aha. So I realized, so naturally, my stepdad is an electrician. So I called him real quick and asked him some, quick questions, relevant questions, and I sought out to do it. And so by the time my boss came back, he's like, "Hey, did you get that quote together?" And I was like, "No, I already, I put them on the count, I kept it under this amount of money, and they're changed. Everything's fixed." And he's like, "Really?" And at that point, he finally was like, "Nah, your brain's better than sweeping floors in a warehouse."
Nice.
And then the trajectory went from there. And
What made you realize that from like doing all those things to having this like anchoring life purpose? Like, what was the turning point? Because you could have kept going on doing all those things and
Right.
probably been pretty happy.
Right. Well, I kind of put this in the book is I just kept having like this little pull that always kept coming up in my life. I'd say like every 5 years, something would just like pull like, you need to be doing something else. But I would just hush it and kind of go back to doing what I was doing, whether that was selling drugs or waiting tables, whatever it was. And I had hit a really rough patch in my life where I was going through a really bad breakup. And I had to make that phone call that I said I'd never move back to Pensacola, Florida. And I had to call my mom and say, "Mom, I need to come back home," because I was going through a bad breakup. The person I was selling drugs with at the time ended up going to jail, so that revenue of income kind of stopped, and my whole world was rocked. And when I moved back home, I ended up doing what I've always known to do, which was bartending and waiting tables. And I started gaining a lot of weight, and I hit up to my heaviest weight, almost 300 pounds. My confidence was low, and I've always been a leader and a motivator. And something was just really off at that point in time. I had really hit a really low point. And so I really started listening to that voice, and long story short, it just started my journey of healing myself. And then I started working with other women, and then here I am today.
You talked in your book about intuition too, and you
Yes.
said that we're the only species that won't listen to our intuition, and then it manifests itself in physical symptoms. So when you personally, when
Right.
your intuition is telling you something, what does it feel like for you?
It feels like, it's almost like, I feel it in my stomach, for me personally. Like
Okay.
it's something that's in my stomach, like do it, or it's like a tightening in my stomach. And so I used to run away from those things, or I would just hush it and go back to what I was doing. But when I have that tightening, that feeling, now I'm at the point where I do it, especially if it scares me. And that's what I tell people that all the time. That's where the growth happens. That's where the change happens. And when I really started tapping into that and really listening to myself, that's when I really started developing into the person that I am today. And that's why I say a lot of people, they don't do it because it scares them, it frightens them, it makes them step outside of their comfort zone. And that's, I tell people all the time, I'm not here to preach to you, but I believe that's our higher power, my man upstairs saying, hey, you need to be doing something else, but we choose to not listen to that, and we just go back into the comfort zone. But every now and again, it's going to come up. It's just what you do with that intuition, what you do with that when it happens. So
Going from that ADD life to more of a focus, purpose life
Right.
started with the physicality
Right.
of getting your body moving, and then was the mental spirit piece through yoga and meditation.
yes.
And then after that, was that when you kind of developed a mission statement for your life?
Yes, kind of. It did, and it really changed. So those were the steps. And then when women would come to me and tell me whether like they took a class and how it just made them feel good about themselves, and they felt confident and they felt beautiful, and all of those things just really made me start feeling like, okay, I'm on it. Like you feel it. And that's what I tell people in the book. You feel when you're on the right path, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So when they would come and, all from a dance class, all from a chair, burlesque cardio class. And then when I did yoga, I got certified in flexibility for yoga. So I started teaching Sexy Flex, and they were like, I never knew my body could move like that. And I feel so good. And I felt great. Like it was something, it's almost hard to describe, I tell people, but you feel it. You know you're on that right path.
I love
Yeah.
that the way that you explain it, because that's how it happened to you, is that this is over years.
Yeah.
And I think when we read books that are in the same genre as yours, we're like, oh, write a mission statement. I need to do that. And we just add it to our to-do list.
Right.
Like, I need to write a mission statement and then pretend like I'm following it, really.
Right.
But what you're talking about is more of a true journey, a transformation.
Right.
So, and for you, it has all these elements in it, which is why I think I'm so attracted to that, because it's like you can sample all that life has to
Right,
offer.
absolutely.
But when you do it with purpose, it's even better. How
how does someone make a mission statement?
That's what I said. My coach, and that's the thing is, my coach told me that, and she was like, "You need to make a mission statement." And I was like, "What the fudge is a mission statement?" You know, I've heard of one for like Nike and, you know, big Burger King and stuff like that, but never like a life's mission statement for yourself. And when she broke it down to me, and she's like, "Well, you have to know your mission statement because you have to know the direction of your life, where your life's going, and that kind of gives you that base ground." And when she explained it to me, I was like, okay. So the first one I had, it was like, I want to live in this huge house, and I want to drive this nice car, and I want to have all this money in my bank account. And I brought it back to her, and she's like, "Yeah, this is not a mission statement.
This is
like
your
your wish
shopping
list." That's what she said. She's like, "This is your wish list. This is not a mission statement." So I had to go back really through it, and she, you know, gave me the steps, which is in my book, which she gave me the steps to do. And when I finally honed it down, like I can just, it relates to my life. And if any opportunities or things that are brought to me that doesn't align with my mission statement, I don't do it. And it makes me more focused, and I'm all over the place myself. I have great ideas, and I'm trying to say yes to almost everybody. I'm one of those that I try to help out so many people, and I kind of I used to overwork myself and overbook myself, but now I know my mission statement. I know what my life is about. I know where I'm going, and that I absolutely recommend that to others to do the same.
And it becomes like a filter
It
for
does.
what you say yes to.
Absolutely.
That's so helpful.
Yeah.
I just watched Primal Survivor we got Disney Plus, and so the Discovery Channel, I think, is on there, or Nat Geo or something like that. But I'm also a big fan of Josh Gates' Expedition Unknown.
Yeah.
How do other people does everyone get a job like that just kind of on accident, or kind of how you did?
I think, you know, the way I did it, I'm not sure how, you know, I got to dive with Josh and shoot with him in Aruba one time, but I never got a chance to really dig into his process. But I think in most cases, people that end up doing this kind of thing are people that aren't afraid to try to craft their career into their lifestyle. So if this is something that they enjoy doing, they just kind of keep cracking at it and find ways to stay content until, you know, something happens. So like me, when I was just trying to make ends meet for almost 10 years, it was, you know, when I left Nashville, I moved back in with my mom. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I just want to not, and it was my choice. I wanted to just save every penny I had and buy more gear, build a production company, and get to a point. Because I saw something that I was like, I think I can make something happen here. And we ended up doing a local TV show called Destination Soundcheck, because they had this free, you know, we have this lease access channel. We have no content. And I was already shooting a lot of travel stuff. And I'm like, well, I'll just put together a formatted show out of all this goofy shit that I've shot. And all the late night drunks loved that show, you know, and it was that demo that I made for that show that I sent in to Travel Channel, that they were like, oh, let's do this. So it's just a matter of doing what you love and keep doing it. You know, once you get to a point where you're like, oh, this isn't working, I give up, then, you know, that's the end of the road. So, you know, being adventurous is not being afraid to take risks and to do things that make you feel more alive, or make you feel scared, which makes you feel more alive. And I think, you know, the times that we're facing right now is a really great example of, you know, nothing is secure, nothing is safe. I took the unsafe route, working for myself and trying, you know, chasing my dreams, and, you know, while other people are like, I like a steady paycheck. And now, as I've said my whole life, I don't think there is such a thing as a steady paycheck. And we know now that that's very, very true. So, you know, I think a lot of people can maybe reassess where they're at in their life right now and use this downtime to say, you know what, it wasn't worth doing this thing that I don't want to be doing. You know, it was probably a better idea to take that risk, and it's not too late to do that. So, are
you the kind of person that ideas just flow through your head all the time, nonstop?
You know, yeah. I think, you know, one of the things that has benefited me is that I've always been one to hear other folks' stories and listening to how they got places or where they'd been. And I think that has, you know, kind of got, you know, me thinking a lot about different things and how to maybe approach things a little differently. So I've always been one to reach out and listen to other people's stories. And I think that's a really big part of kind of how it crafted my journey, is that, there's a lot of interesting people out there and a lot of people that have been successful in their own way. And certainly you can measure success a ton of different ways, not just by, wealth. So I was one to always reach out and hear people's story. And I think that kind of helped, me think about different ideas and, and what to focus on.
How can people who are wannabe entrepreneurs, maybe in a 9-to-5 right now, reframe failure or even maybe test the waters so that it's less of a sting if they want to try out one of their ideas? Right.
So I think that, anything that you do with an idea, I mean, some of the things that I think about is that maybe start small, right? I mean, so you're going to, bites at the elephant, don't eat it all at one time, but start small. But if you build something that you maybe have some scale to or some iterative growth, right? Just so, don't do something that is one-off, something that you can build upon, right? Start small, think big, but build something that you can scale. And scale can mean a lot of different things, right? It can mean by scale from a geography perspective, from a volume perspective, from an efficiency perspective. There's a lot of things that encompass scale, but I think thinking big is great, but I think starting small is important.
So almost like pick the idea that has the smallest barrier of entry so that you can do it, but still have that 9-to-5.
Well, maybe. I think that, there are a lot of things that kind of factor into kind of the leap of faith, right? But there's nothing wrong with keeping the 9-to-5 and starting on the side and trying to create momentum and learning from your mistakes. And certainly, that idea that you may have, it's gonna augment, it's gonna change. I mean, there's some, as soon as you get into it, you're gonna learn things about that idea and think about them differently. So, it's important, right? And to learn, trial and error certainly is something that's helpful. But also, I think that once you get on something that has some success early on, and maybe you have some early adopters, and you're trying to become, you're just launching a company, but then you're trying to get to kind of this early stage growth. There will be a lot of what I call shiny pennies, right? Some things out there that that would distract you, that would maybe, you walk over here to pick up a penny, but you've got, nickels and quarters and dollars ahead of you. So I think to being disciplined, I always say in our organization, I love our entrepreneurial spirit. We have a great spirit about our company, but we're grounded in core values. We have purpose, but entrepreneurial spirit coupled with discipline, it's pretty powerful, right?
Obviously, having those mentors are a critical part of being able to unpack some of these things that you're talking about. Who's your mentor now, and how would you recommend in quarantine that people seek out a mentor or mentors?
Right. Well, I have a lot of different mentors about a lot of different things in my life. Unfortunately, with technology and everything else, there's a lot of easy ways to communicate now, right? So I think that, but setting time aside to do that is important. And when I talk about working on your business as opposed to working in your business, I mean, you can't always just stop in the middle of something you're doing. But I mean, to take mental notes and say, this is a challenge and this is a hurdle and this is something that I like to talk with somebody that's had this type of experience. It's important, and you got to set time aside, to do that and to think ahead. So again, there's several mentors from a business perspective, from a leadership perspective, from a personal perspective. But having a rhythm and touch points on that is important too, right? To set aside time and taking mental notes along the way to make it meaningful. To ask about what things have worked and what they haven't worked. When we start, we have a quarterly rhythm to our company, and the first thing that we do when we break out is, okay, tell me about what's going great in your life, what is, what's working in our organization and what's not working in our organization, and being honest about that. And I think you can kind of take that same, type of approach to a lot of things in life. And then if you're making mental notes along the way, so when you get that opportunity to talk to your mentor, it's meaningful, and you can really share some experiences that haven't gone your way and maybe things that have, and learn from both.
So you have that expectation management again with what does that mentorship relationship look like?
Sure.
Is that, just shooting the breeze over a beer, or is it more purposeful like what you're talking about?
Exactly.
How do you honor both the enterprising part of yourself that really values P&Ls, profit and loss, but also the creative heart-led part of yourself that values that outside the box thinking and following your intuition. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I recently, my friend invited me to New Zealand to go speak at his event, and my topic was the art of paradox. So I'll have to share that with you later. But I
Oh, please,
love the
yeah.
power of and. Yeah, I think the power of and unlocks so much, right? There's this experience that often people in improv use, which is yes and instead of but. And it's a really fun exercise. It's very mind opening. I also think it's very true in life. It's yes and. And I think what keeps us from often saying yes and goes back to the very first topic you and I touched on, which is fear. The only reason we don't say yes and something is we're fearful of what we're stepping into. But again, I think for me, I always go to the worst case scenario. I had a friend, Andy, at Apple, and we were often planning our product launches and new store openings. And I was always like, okay, guys, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? So whenever I called him, I realized this one day because I texted him, and my name came up on his phone. And he actually had the worst case scenario board game image instead of my face. And I was like, dude, he's like, you always ask about the worst case scenario. I was like, oh, it's true. Because I think for me, that's my way to grapple with what fear is holding me back. And if it's unidentified fear, all the more humans shy away from it. But if I can identify there's fear that's holding me back, and then I can identify what that fear is, suddenly it just dissolves because you're like, yeah, that's not that bad. So for me, the art of paradox is really important because it's about finding that and I think what holds us back from finding the and is fear. And so to answer your question, super long answer, sorry, I think it's finding the intersection between purpose and profit. It is saying, yeah, I really like running commercial businesses. I get a thrill when we win something, and I love making money for my company. That's my job. And I do that by coaching and developing people and watching them thrive. And like that gives me great joy. You can earn money in many ways. You can be a slave driver, you can be a really challenging boss, you can, beat people half to death to make them kind of eke out that last bit of work. Or you can be the kind of leader that people like working for. So I had thought about in the back half of my career, do I move to nonprofit? Do I stop working corporately at all and really just like write and speak? I love doing that stuff too. But I realized I'm good at the commercial stuff and I really love work. I love what I do. And I can do that job and also build into people. It doesn't mean I have to go completely into a different space. So for me, that was a very fulfilling observation about my life because I really did explore the gamut. I had explored and really kind of went to the end stage of working for a nonprofit as their chief growth officer and thought, yeah, I can come in every day and serve this amazing purpose. And I sit on a board of a nonprofit. But at the end of the day, I still feel that I serve an amazing purpose in my job at McCann. And I found a company that has great DNA and it's an ethos I share. And regardless that we're making money and we're a for-profit company, I still get to build into 400 people every day. I get to work for a company I believe in, and we get to build interesting social dialogue by helping brands play meaningful roles. So I'm like, oh, that's actually really congruent.
I'd love to start with the start ugly concept. You mentioned the approach of starting ugly as kind of hoping to fail, which this was in a different interview that you mentioned this, and that kind of blew my mind because I was thinking, wait a minute, isn't that negative thinking? So what's the difference?
The challenge I find is most of us waste so let's talk about money, time, and life. We only have a finite amount of time as far as I know. And, money comes and goes, and so does failure and trying. So I just found that if we could stop thinking and do more, and if we fail, that's a bonus because actually the failure, right? We hear it all the time, is not trying at all. And we rob ourselves of the most precious commodity, which is time. So you're better off trying something and starting ugly and then perfecting it as you go. So it's become kind of my mantra and it's helped me. I don't want to have any regrets when I'm done. I have a few things I want to get done. And I just want to make sure I accomplish as much as I can while I'm here.
I'm curious though, with your experience working with entrepreneurs, creatives, and even high level corporate traditional job people, what does starting ugly how does that look different for creatives and entrepreneurs versus people in like a regular traditional job who want to climb the corporate ladder?
Yeah. So like for entrepreneurs, starting ugly is usually starting a new process, a new business, a new line of business. So it's usually around starting something fairly new. If you're in a corporate career, starting ugly could mean like starting a new software program to track your sales, or starting like just creating new habits around things. Meredith, the one story that I think it was a George Clooney story, he had his uncle who he worshipped was on his deathbed, and George was there, and the guy was yelling. I mean, really angry as he was dying. And he looked at George and he said, "Do whatever you can to accomplish everything you want, because before you know it, it's all over." And he goes, "There's so many things I regret I didn't do." And you hear that often with people at the end of their life. They realize, like, where did the time go? Why didn't I do what I had to do? Like,